The Last of Us. I want to discuss the show as someone who has not played the game and has very limited knowledge of the game's story, and I'm going to go through each episode and then at the end rank them all. Let's just get into it. I feel like this is less likely to cause some kind of aneurysm/stroke than if I were to talk about the Oscars. Cate Blanchett was robbed, Banshees was robbed, and it's obvious that the voters only saw 1 or 2 movies from last year. There, I just said it. I'm gonna just throw that out there. All right, let's get started with episode 1. Starting with a warning we didn't heed was a great start. I think the main characters were well established. I really liked the daughter. I'm so glad that they picked a good actress. For me, the best part of this episode is the sequence where they're trying to escape town. It rings with such horrible authenticity. That period of uncertainty when you know that the government is probably enacting some kind of plan, but we as the public don't know what that is, and everyone is hitting the panic button. I also love just how long the sequence is. I really felt like I was there. I appreciate the acting choice that Pedro Pascal used when, spoiler, I guess, his daughter is killed. He's not so much crying and blubbering, but he looks shocked and traumatized. Having such a raw rather than typically sad portrayal was more sad. I wasn't watching a performance. I wasn't watching someone trying to go for an Emmy. I was watching someone freaking out. I really didn't like how they wrote Ellie when she was the kind of rebellious brat. The dialogue sucks. The performance is not there. When she curses, nothing about it feels real. It's so... It doesn't feel realistic at all. They're just trying to tell me, oh, she's a badass little girl. It's a hard character to write. Most people don't know how to do it, and it comes off as really cringeworthy. It's a small part, but otherwise, I think this is a fantastic way to start a show, to set the stakes, and to give us a little slice of how unforgiving the plot is going to be. I would give this episode an 8 out of 10. Episode 2. Damn, dude. Oh man. It's one of those things where everyone was so distracted at how great one scene was, they're kind of forgetting the rest. So the scene I'm talking about is where a creature called a clicker is introduced. That whole sequence is great. I love the design of the clicker. The sequence as a whole was well edited. It's very tense. The lead up to it gets us into the right state of mind. This episode also brings up an interesting concept, which is all these creatures being able to communicate to each other through this kind of network of fungus. It's not something they really delved into later on, which I think is a missed opportunity. That being said, there's a huge part of this episode that is mostly just Ellie being irritating. You pushed it too far. Nothing she's doing is endearing. The adults' reactions to her don't make me laugh. I just want it to be over. It's cringe. I think the worst part is when she just starts slamming a bell.
Ding ding! Yes, sir, I would like your finest sweet, please.
The dialogue is bad. The character is insufferable. And I don't think her character shifting to the more mature Ellie that I started to love made this episode worth it. The production value is great. I think there's some really strong green screen. I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10. Episode 3. Yeah, I see why this one was trending so much. This episode features almost no Joel or Ellie. Instead, focus on a survivalist and a stranger who shows up and eventually becomes his partner. Once we get into this survivalist story, I was fully locked in from start to finish, and I will admit that toward the end of it, I almost cried. Both actors do an amazing job with the material. I think it's paced perfectly. Even though it's in this horrible situation, there's a real romance to it. I saw this great comment online saying that this episode isn't tragic. I don't know, I think that's a really interesting point. Their story gets wrapped up in probably the best way they could have hoped for, all things considered. it made me sad in kind of the best way, where, the cheap way to do it is just take a character you like and just like shoot him in the head. And that can work, but this episode didn't really need to do that. It gave us a much more bittersweet kind of trajectory with these two. I don't know, even if I didn't see them later on, I didn't care. I was just happy to spend that little slice of life with them. That's what it was, really. It was just a slice of life story to show the optimism that can happen in this world. I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. Episode 4. They actually managed to get the Ellie character right. I had no loyalty to what she was supposed to be because I've never played the game, but they made me like her. Personally, I think characters can bond just as much in action as in dialogue. This episode did both and delves a little bit more into how difficult it is to find a sense of unity or peace in the apocalypse. The action works well. I like the driving scenes too. Just like in the pilot episode, they're very panicky, and I felt like I was in the car. Solid episode. I give it a 7.
What if you don't find him?
I will.
How do you know?
I'm persistent. You got up pretty early if you want to grab more sleep.
I'm not even tired.
Episode 5. I really like this episode. The older brother did a very good job. I like the fact that the younger brother bonded with Ellie, so you have these scenes where it very much feels like the parents are off to the side, and then you have the kids off trying to have fun and get through the situation, and the adults are letting them because it's too late for them to have any fun in this life, so let the kids have fun. I feel like that was a very natural kind of division of parties, and it was fun to watch people who have very different backgrounds and very different personalities and experience put their heads together and figure out a solution. It's just good writing, it's entertaining, and this is what I want to see in a show that features threats around every corner. Damn, does this episode end with not just one bang, but 2. Massive infected scene. The whole sequence is so fun to watch, but then at the very end, there's another shocking reveal that I think the episode did brilliantly. The actor for the older brother displaying shock and on the verge of hyperventilating or collapse, I think was done very realistically.
Easy. Henry, give me the gun. Henry, give me the gun. What did I do?
I would give this episode an 8 out of 10. Loved this one. All right, episode 6. Starting to slow down a little bit here. I would have liked more zombies in the show in general. This episode is way too slow, just because it has a great moment, 2 great moments in this episode. I don't think justifies the pace. The moments I'm speaking of is when Joel is first reunited with a family member, and then later on when he has a confrontation with that same family member. Both scenes are great. They feel very real. It really seems like these actors got to know each other well. At least it came across that way, which I think is great. You can tell that the brother's wife is kind of running things in a very surreptitious kind of way. I feel like women would especially pick up on these aspects of her character, controlling of their husband or trying to control a conversation or trying to wheedle her way into any kind of discussion. I liked that. I liked how sneaky she was without being an outright villain. There's honestly not really much I could say about this episode at all. Good moments of drama. There's some very strong acting. I like that we got to see a survivor town. Yeah, 6 out of 10. Good enough. Episode 7. Guys, I'm getting a little worried. This is like Stranger Things episode 7 all over again. Your season is 9 episodes, and you spend 2 full episodes, or basically full episodes, completely separated from the main story. That is very bad structure. I'm sorry. It's called narrative thrust. It's when the story is progressing and you feel like you're part of a journey. Moving away from that can be effective, like in episode 3, but then you move again and then bring us an episode that really doesn't accomplish anything. Nothing happens in episode 7, except for one zombie attack at the end. But basically, nothing happens. If nothing's happening in an episode, then we need to learn something. It has to be one of those 2 things, okay? You can't just dick around. What did we learn? Okay, we learned that Ellie is lesbian, And yeah, cool. That's pretty much about it. Yeah, that's yeah, good episode. Definitely worth 45 minutes of my time to learn that. This episode at its most interesting was toward the beginning when Ellie is in school. And I thought, okay, this is a great way for us to learn how the government is running education, because what makes Ellie an interesting character to me is that she wasn't around before this infection started. Once we get to the mall, even though it's pretty, it goes on for way too long. It's super repetitive. They could have cut 20 minutes out of this sequence and not lost a thing. And again, this entire story is something Ellie could have just said in dialogue. And in fact, she does that in episode 9, and it's about the same effect. And the whole middle of it was a bunch of bad jokes, flirting, montages, and faffing about. We all saw the ending coming a mile away. It's unfulfilled. For that, I'm going to give this one a 5. All right, this asshole. Episode 8, we are definitely back on track. This is a great episode with a couple hiccups. I think the main villain turned a little cartoonishly evil. I've also just seen that segment in so many episodes in so many movies. People fist fighting while the building's on fire. It's happened 1,000 times. It still worked. The end result of how it affected Ellie was very cathartic. And I like how the episode was split into sections. This episode starts with Joel being injured and Ellie taking care of him. She makes many smart decisions in this episode, and it was great to watch, and I believed it. Just as she's captured, Joel has to take the reins. And what I love is that you can see his mental state through his actions. You've never seen him that angry and that dedicated to violence. He almost seems to enjoy it because he's just venting, driven past all morality to get to the one he loves. And I completely buy that in the apocalypse, religion would be a very effective tool, both for good and for evil. I knew this guy was a dick the moment I saw him. Maybe because he looks like an evil Bill Burr. Overall, I think this was a very tense, well-structured episode with personally my favorite performance by Bella Ramsey in this role. 8 out of 10.
Hey, look, it's me. It's me. It's okay.
But I...
It's okay. It's okay, baby girl. I got you.
And last up, we got episode 9. I'll say right off the bat, I think this episode's a little rushed. One of the few things I knew about the game was that there was a giraffe. I'm assuming it would really work for people who play the game, but the overall effect I don't feel like was this kind of rising tension and misery and then have this one sweet moment with a giraffe. I feel like we've had lots of sweet moments. I mean, episode 7 was so sweet, it was saccharine. I mean, I was gonna get diabetes from that shit. The truth we find out about the hospital, the surgery, you understand why Joel commits the actions that he does, but his actions are very much undercut by two things. One, it's too easy. I don't know, it's like playing GoldenEye on easy mode or something. There's just something about it that doesn't quite ring true. Although I do love how vicious he is in this scene. That dark side of him from his past has fully emerged, and we see what kind of man he was back then. Still, it could have worked even with that if they didn't also dull all the sound effects and put in this honestly quite cheesy orchestral track in the background. It made the whole sequence feel sanitized when really it should feel raw and shocking. This is Joel at possibly his most brutal and brutally efficient. They kind of scuffed the edges of it. For a show that's supposed to be somewhat realistic and hard-hitting, this was almost a cliche. My favorite part of the whole episode is actually the last shot. You see the character thinking. And usually when someone's thinking in a show, there's a tendency to where their eyes are kind of bouncing all over the place. And for this particular scenario, it was very important that the character consider different options, but not in a rushed under pressure kind of manner. It was a perfect way to end the season, and I thought the acting couldn't have been any better for that kind of moment. I think it was a solid episode to end the season. I'm gonna give this one a 7 out of 10. And that's the season. I'm gonna be generous and give this an 8 out of 10. It's probably like a 7.5, but I don't like doing decimal points, maybe because I'm bad at math. And as far as ranking them, from worst to best, there's the rather inconsequential episode 7, there's the mostly irritating episode 2, the rather dull episode 6, 9, 4, 8, the wonderfully paced episode 5, as a runner-up, episode 1, and as number 1, episode 3 is the most emotionally effective, dramatic, and downright beautiful episode of the whole series. The acting is amazing. Although I wouldn't want more than one episode to be like it, as itself, it is a great bit of drama. That's about it, but I would love to know what you guys think of the show as a whole, and maybe do your own ranking of all the episodes. Was I too kind to some? Was I too harsh to others? Let me know. I'll see you guys next time.